at this time on Al Jazeera.
Top stories here on Al Jazeera. Witnesses have been speaking of a massacre by government security forces in the Libyan city of Benghazi. Al Jazeera has also been told demonstrators in the capital, Tripoli, have been attacked. Then looking at Bahrain, where talks are expected to get underway between protesters and the country's rulers. The move comes after demonstrators gathered again at the Pearl Roundabout in the capital, Manama, after riot police pulled out. A national strike's been called for Sunday. Protests are now being planned in Morocco, where it's being billed as a day of dignity. Thousands expected to call for the king to dissolve parliament and implement reforms. Opposition groups are also planning to hold demonstrations in Iran. Let's look at some financial news. Members of the G20, rich and developing countries, have hammered out a deal in France on how to measure imbalances in the global economy. The issue's been blamed for making the 2008 financial crisis much worse than it could have been. But as Jackie Rowland reports from Paris, it took a bit of work to get China on board.
Putting on a show of unity. The smiles of the family photo can't paper over the divisions within the G20. The world's leading financial powers agree that there are imbalances in the global economy, but it's much harder to agree on how to measure them. The sticking point was China. It didn't want its massive foreign currency reserves to be used as an indicator, but G20 members were able to reach a compromise.
This is a very complicated undertaking, and we need to be very careful to make sure we create a level playing field across countries so that financial activity does not migrate to jurisdictions where standards are weaker or less vigorously enforced.
Ministers have also been focusing on commodity prices and food prices in particular. They want to find ways to protect the poorest countries against big price swings.
We have had a major convergence of views between different countries, developing countries and emerging countries, industrialized countries, to say that we had to go much farther in transparency, in the identification of stocks, in the use of agricultural land to respond to the need of population for food.
The financial crisis of 2008 was a global phenomenon, and ministers recognise that they'll need to take a global approach if another meltdown is to be avoided. The French hosts of this meeting have warned countries that they'll need to put self-interest to one side if the whole of the G20 is to achieve strong, sustainable growth. The long haggling over indicators raises a bigger question. If the members of the G20 found it so hard to agree on how to measure global imbalances, will they ever reach agreement on how to tackle those problems? Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera, Paris.
2 Iranian Navy ships are expected to sail through the Suez Canal to the Mediterranean on Monday. It will be the first time Iranian vessels have sailed through that key shipping lane since 1979. Believed to be on their way to Syria. Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman has condemned the move as a provocation. 2 German journalists have been released from prison in Iran after being arrested for spying. Markus Hellwig and Jens Kosch were sentenced to 20 months in prison for interviewing the son and lawyer of a woman condemned to die by stoning. But Iran's revolutionary court has now quashed the sentences, instead handing down a $50,000 fine for each man. Meanwhile, Germany's ruling Christian Democrats could be in for a drubbing in a series of regional elections that begin in just a few hours. That could further shake the stability of the German Chancellor Angela Merkel's coalition, which has seen its popularity slide. Nick Spicer has this report from Hamburg, one of the first cities to vote.
Shipping gets a vote of sorts in Hamburg politics. It is Europe's 3rd biggest port. And the mayor wants to dredge the river so that more vessels can come and use it. But that's not going to save Christoph Ahlhaus. The man from Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats is poised to lose, some 20 points behind the Social Democrats candidate he sounds in denial.
So you're still hopeful? Even
Sure.
though, yeah.
We do not only hope, we will fight.
Voters in Hamburg are starting off what will be a whole season of regional elections in Germany. There will be at least 7 out of 16 regions, and they threaten to give Angela Merkel's governing coalition a very rocky ride, and especially for the junior partner in that coalition, the Free Democrats.
Leave the shop open, they chant, young members of the local Free Democrats. The shop has to close at 4 on Saturdays, and these defenders of the free market don't like that. Their party scored well and played a kingmaker role in the last general election, joining Angela Merkel in her coalition government. Some 2 years on, there's a problem. Experts say giant deficit spending saved the German economy, so few people are now buying the Free Democrats' mantra of tax cuts.
They said if we lower the taxes, we will have a revival of our economy. We have not lowered our taxes, and we had nevertheless a revival of our economy.
Hamburg's politics are like those of the other regions voting this year, largely local. But if the Free Democrats keep losing ground, Chancellor Merkel may need to start looking for a new national coalition partner. Nick Spicer, AlJazeera, Hamburg.
Now, Reuters news agency is reporting Pakistani troops have killed up to 15 fighters who attacked a security checkpoint. This happened in Mohmand, a northwestern tribal region on the Afghan border. The gunfight lasted several hours, according to a local government official. Troops have killed more than 100 fighters there in the past month. Early indications from Uganda's presidential election suggest the incumbent, Yoweri Museveni, has a huge lead over his rival. Provisional results from nearly all the polling stations show he has 68% of the vote. Mohammed Ado filed this report from Kampala.
President Museveni is on his way to giving himself a new 5-year term in office. That will make his rule of Uganda 30 good years. The opposition have already started complaining. They say the vote is rigged.
And I'm sure you have been shown, many of you, a sample of the predict ballots which were being carried around by some of Museveni's supporters. Predict in favor of Mr. Museveni. These were found out just outside the polling stations.
Security has been tightened in and around the capital city, Kampala, where majority of the opposition supporters are. There are fears that the opposition would bring people out to protest against the victory of President Yoweri Museveni. And the government is saying it's not taking any chances and will not allow any such demonstrations to take place.
News from the Americas and Mexico's president, Felipe Calderón, says he's sending more troops to fight the drugs cartels in the country's north. The border region has become a battleground between security forces and gangs trying to control the lucrative smuggling routes into the United States. More than 34,000 people have died in drug-related violence since 2006.